Call this to
Everyone
order.
ready? Let's light this candle. Call this meeting to order. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. It's not on here, but I assume we want a roll call. So, Jeff Conway, are you here?
Yep.
Greg Stremka, are you here?
Yes.
April Carlson, are you here?
Yes.
Wade Welper?
Yes.
Eric Morgan? Yes. Okay. Entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve. We have a second. Any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, motion carries. We will proceed with Jeff Wilson's virtual interview. Is it,
Hope we don't kill this guy in his truck.
What's he doing?
He's in his truck. I said.
Oh, he's driving?
I hope he's not driving.
I'm sure. He's sitting outside where his next
Oh,
interview is.
okay.
Oh, okay.
So he's hope he's not running
So he's
late.
got another interview somewhere else.
Right, yeah, right after this one, that's what we had to move ourselves.
Competition steep out there.
Mhm.
That would be a D.
in the interest of time, I think we can skip reintroducing ourselves to him. Everyone okay with that?
I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Should we introduce as or read our first question?
Yeah. Let's just get right into it.
I mean, our names are on the video. too,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
That's true.
Here we go.
Park. Back.
Hello, Jeff. Can you hear us? Oh, you must be on mute.
Hang on. How about there? Now can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great.
Awesome. Is that a half Windsor or full Windsor, Jeff? What do we got there? Your tie? It's the only one that I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay.
I
Just kidding.
in the yeah, it's actually it's just a half.
Just a half? No problem.
So very interesting. I mean, adaptability, right? To be interviewing in a back seat of your truck, to be able to do this. So I just appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate being here today with all of you. So thank you again for this.
No problem. Well, we want to be expeditious here, so good afternoon and welcome to La Crescent Hoka Public Schools. Thank you for meeting with us about becoming our school district's next superintendent. As you may know, we will be interviewing another candidate today. All candidates will be notified by MSBA as soon as the school board has finished our deliberations. School board members will rotate asking you questions today, and we will all be taking notes to assist us in our deliberations. Please know we are listening carefully while we write and do not intend to be disrespectful. Also, we have allocated 1 hour for the interview, and our last question will be whether you have any questions for us. You may use whatever time remains for this purpose. And I think we'll begin with our first question, if Mr. Kopp wants to take it away.
Or Mr.
He's not here
Conway.
today.
Or, sorry, Mr. Conway. Too many bald guys named Jeff in this district. All right, here we go. Mr. Conway, I'm a fellow bald guy, I can say that.
Nice. You sure you want this job, buddy?
I mean, we're not
I'm
opposed
sure.
to one more.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Now
come
I
on,
see.
Morgan.
Well, three's the charm. they
Another
say.
bald
We're
Jeff, here you go.
We're open to more jobs.
Great, another Jeff. Okay, all right.
All right. Jeff, can you tell us about your first 100 days being superintendent of the La Crescent Hoka School District?
Yeah, so I can start off by saying, prior to my first 100 days, if I were to be offered this position, I would start next week, in the sense that I would be behind the scenes already, just getting a feel and the climate of the community as well as the schools, just to understand, gain a better contextual understanding of what's going on. That's what I'd use my current vacation days for. I would be coming down and doing some visits just to touch base. So that way I could get things going before the July 1 start date. I could see that happening quite often, actually, going down. I've banked a lot of my vacation days, so this would be a great opportunity. But I would look at 4 essential areas to focus on to set the tone. One being is academics. As the instructional leader of the school district, academics will be the top benchmark. I need to make sure I know how my students are performing and then create a plan for improving student performance in the future. And that's not just myself. That is a collective effort with many of the staff that are there, as well as parents, just to get a better understanding of where we're falling behind. If it's a curriculum piece, if it's a gap with in our teaching and instruction pedagogy, if it's a gap just in professional development opportunities, so teachers are delivering the appropriate content. The second piece, obviously, would be budgetary concerns. We all know that districts are on a shoestring budget. We have to be fiscally responsible. We know we always have to do more with less. I would sit down with the finance team, whoever all that would include, comb through the data and understand how these budget decisions that we make are going to impact kids. How will it affect our students? So those are the 2 things there. The other piece I would look at is obviously relationships. I know I'll have to develop relationships in and outside of the building. Many people I will have to connect with many different constituents. But my first and foremost priority would be the school board, building connections with the school board. You'd be my first priority in building those relationships. So we are on the same page as we maneuver through whatever we have to maneuver through. That would be my number one thing that I would do. You represent the voices of the community. You were voted on, so you are my main people that I have to connect with all the time. And as I indicated last time in my first one, I do feel like I'm a connector, and I'm able to do that pretty freely with whomever I speak with. And the last thing I think for superintendency entry would be planning, understanding and knowing the calendar, what's happening in that calendar, and then from there, just diving into the strategic planning, making sure that the staff know what the strategic plan is, what areas of weakness is happening in that strategic plan, how do we communicate this plan out, how are we transparent in what we do, what are the steps that we're doing to make sure we have the right point people in place to make these pieces happen. So those would be my 4 essential areas that I would focus on in my first 100 days as a superintendent. Again, academics, budget, relationships, and then planning. And I foresee myself being able to do a lot of behind the scenes work prior to a July 1 start date, just being able to be a part of the community before sooner than later.
What three qualities do you possess that you believe make you an outstanding administrator? And what one quality will you need support with to be successful?
Well, the first thing that I possess is I'm passionate. I love this work. I love what I do. I don't think that you're in the grind of this work if you aren't passionate about it. So I'm passionate. I feel that I'm able to communicate with anybody across the board, recognizing who my target audience is and having a conversation, whatever it may be about. I think the other piece with that is a listener. And this is a skill set that I think I've attained throughout my journey, is just being a really good listener and understanding what different viewpoints and different aspects people are coming from. So those would be my three things that I think would behoove me. I think that a weakness coming in, you know, I think for me, it's just knowing the lay of the land, connecting with all of you to understand what the community is about, understanding where we want to go. But those are pieces that are exciting to me as well. I love to be able to collaborate and build with folks. So though it could be somewhat of a weakness, that is something that I'm excited for and something that I don't see myself having challenges with per se. This is just what we're built to do. So those would be my components.
Thanks, Jeff. We're on question number 6. Can you please tell us how you're going to make a difference?
Tell me how I'm going to make a difference?
Yep.
Yeah, great question. So when I think about leadership in general, I think about how leadership isn't something you attain to be. Leadership is just that, leadership. When you have people around you that can grow, that are reaching their ability, that can reach their highest potential and have that success, that's leadership. And that is all over the board. That doesn't mean just superintendent leadership. That is in all aspects, community members to other staff in a school building. I've always been a student to leadership in that capacity. So how do I make a difference? I think just my interactions with people, being able to smile, to laugh with people, have fun, to be able to connect in such a way where not only are we talking about maybe your child's academics, that particular teacher, that particular paraprofessional, but understanding and knowing their family dynamics too. As you all know, I'm in a building of 950 students and 150 staff members. They all have my cell phone. We're all connected in some form or fashion, and it's getting to know people, the humanitarian component of that. And I think that once you build those connections, that is what leads to change with people. They feel valued, they feel listened to, they feel they have a voice, and they feel they want to stay, they want to be there. And I think that's what I would bring to the table in that sense.
Thank you.
What have you found to be effective in increasing the achievement of at-risk students?
Yeah, I think can you say that one more time for me?
What have you found to be effective in increasing the achievement of at-risk students?
So that's the name of the game, being effective. And in my entire career, I have been faced with that exact challenge. We have students that are high poverty, high risk. Okay, we can identify all those factors, great, but let's not label kids. They're still geniuses at heart. How do we help and support them and give them the support they need so that they can be successful and we're not writing off kids just because they might be in a certain disadvantaged workspace or work home. And so, again, I think first and foremost, it's connecting with kids. You have to have a relationship with kids before you can even begin to teach kids. Once you have that relationship established and they know you care about them, then things will go much better from there. That doesn't mean it's all rainbows and unicorns. We have to continue to dig in, and we have to find the skill set where they're at. We benchmark to see where they're at, and we scaffold it. So that way we can continue to move them across. So we need to have some data marks, data points to see where students are at. If we're talking specific individual students, we want to see where their data points are, and then continually just re-encouraging them, watch them grow, letting them know exactly where they are. It's important. Hey, here's where you are on this scale, but here's where we want to see you by the end of, let's say, 5th grade, 8th grade. This is where we want to see you go. I think being honest and real with students so they know where they're at is important. And then it's also building relationships with families and letting them know. Right? Most families, with like parent-teacher conferences, for example, most families, they want to know 2 things. One, do you like my kid? And the other thing they want to know is, does my kid have friends? Those are typically the 2 things that parents want to know. So let's get through that. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how great your kid is. Let's talk about the strength of your kid. I mean, we are in this business of like, it's red carpet rollout. We have got to build kids up and support them. And we have got to do a much better job, I think, with parents too, and letting their parents know, hey, this is where your child is. That doesn't mean you're a bad parent. We are a partnership, and we want to help as much as we can with your child so that they're successful. So in my entire career, it's always been that way. It's connecting with a child, letting them know where they're at academically. It's building those partnerships with parents, and just watching them thrive. That doesn't mean it's a foolproof plan, but it's just a lot of hard work. It's a lot of hard work, and you just keep at it, and you keep working through it, and you celebrate the successes. You celebrate those wins when students are doing well. And if the students aren't doing so well, great. We reteach it. We revisit it. We go back to it. It's not that they're not going to get it. They will. We just hang in there with it in that moment.
Thank you.
All right, Jeff, we're on question 8. Also, Gary wanted me to mention, did you receive an email with the questions a few minutes before?
No.
It was just a few minutes ago. All right, so feel free to check your email and have that pulled up if you'd like.
We're just going with it. We're just going with it, Eric. We're going with it.
Oh, good for you. Okay. So question number 8, you are entering a new school district. How are you going to go about building relationships? You've already kind of answered this, but have at it.
Yeah, so let's just say I get that call, Jeff, we'd love for you to be the new leader of our school district. Game on. I'm figuring out how to set up shop, which I would need some of your help with. Like, let's go to the local coffee shop. I don't drink coffee, but let's go there anyway, and we're going to figure out a place just a way we can get out there just to meet and greet people. I think that's important. I think getting my name out there, getting my face out there, and just sharing what my background experiences are, what that entails. And then again, I think just being very open and honest with people and finding out what, people think about the school and having that honest feedback. Because I think collectively you get that approach from stakeholders and you can see the areas that are popping up of themes that we need to work on. And I would make those specifically my goals to help and support the school district moving forward. Because it's great when people are doing really good at things, but we really want to work on the areas that we need help and support in to do a much better job. So I just think about, again, laying out in the coffee shop areas, meeting with teachers, other staff, certainly with the school board often. And again, just being a face out in the community, whether it's, the fine arts events, the athletic events, just putting a name to a face and being open and just, hey, here's who I am. Let's have a conversation if they're willing to listen. And if anything, I'm willing to listen.
All right, thank you.
All right, Jeff, describe your approach to staff evaluations.
My approach to staff evaluations. Well, as superintendent, I certainly would have conversations with principals about staff evaluations to start with, about, the chain of command, who is supervising who. And if it's staff evaluations, I want to make sure that the supervisors are actually doing that, and they're doing that to a degree of they're doing that in a formal way. I'm not going to be that one to step on toes. I want our supervisors to do what they need to do to help supervise, to support staff. And I'm sorry, did you say teacher or staff?
Staff.
Staff.
Okay. Yeah, so my experience with that has been, it really is, as a principal, I oversee a lot of staff in my building, and so we go through that process where we do check-ins, and it's a constant check-in. It's not just, okay, we meet every 8 weeks or 10 weeks. We want to be constantly checking in to see if we need to troubleshoot any challenges or any areas. I want to create that atmosphere for staff to be able to come to me if they have any challenges. I want to create that atmosphere that if, especially during a pandemic, where it's been the last few years, through the racial injustice that we've gone through, I've had a lot of staff that are just struggling. And it's really about being able to connect with staff in such a way that you keep them, they're on the edge of that cliff already, but you keep them on that cliff, and you keep them there with you. You let them know how much you care about them, how much you support them. So there's that component to really coaching people up. And then there's the other component of, as we go through, staff evaluations with things, I make sure that my other supervisors are in sync. They are following the proper protocols. They're following how it's laid out from the district. We're crossing all our I's, crossing all our T's and dotting our I's, and then that way we're just really solid and we're straight in that manner. And I think a big part of the supervision process is the goal is just to get better, to, again, have those coaching conversations and to get people on par to really rise up to do a better job than what they could possibly have done before. But there's got to be buy-in to that, and that's our job as supervisors with that buy-in. We've got to give them the tools to be successful so that they can buy in. We've got to offer that professional development if that's what is needed. We have to offer opportunities for our staff to grow. Otherwise, we just become stagnant.
Thank you. Provide an example of how you have supported both staff and students' mental health.
So this kind of goes back to the last conversation we had, especially in a atmosphere where we have certainly a lot of racial injustice happening, servicing 95% students of color in a building, servicing staff of color as well, just creating that space for students and staff so that way they can articulate, have conversations. They can, we create affinity groups for staff that they could just talk about whatever it is. And of course, I'm not invited to those affinity groups, but it's also our white folk having affinity groups too, to be able to have conversations as to the challenges that we see, how we're dealing, what does it mean to be equitable, what are the things that we're doing in our classrooms that may not be equitable. It's really having hard conversations. So that could be anywhere from maybe we're taking a look at our own teaching practices. Maybe we're looking at our own belief systems. Maybe we're looking at staff training and equitable practices. Maybe we're looking at report cards, hiring practices. So for me, has been a big one is trying to hire people of color in my building as much as possible. If I can find a person of color in my building, it's really important that students see themselves in the building. That's super important. And I think that just, again, it goes back to building those relationships. But there's only so much, I think, as a white male that I'm able to do. So, and I recognize that. I have my own racial consciousness on that. So I think it's important that we open up and we invite students and to be able to have conversations in open spaces, whether it's circling up, same as our staff, but I also think it's important that we give teachers tools and the opportunities to be able to create that space for students. And we don't just shut it down like, yeah, we're not going to talk about that. It's really important that we do have conversations about equitable practices. It's important that we increase student talk. Student voice is critical. And a lot of times, the same students that we serve are also the same students that we are quick to say, yeah, this isn't the time or place. When really, it is the time and place. This is where we get better as humans.
Okay, this question relates to strategic planning. What were the top 5 areas of the last strategic plan that you helped develop?
The top 5 pieces were identifying a new mission statement, which then corresponded to a new vision. We then developed new core values and principles. We created short-term and long-term goals to those pieces. And then it's also being able to have a communication roadmap to be able to be transparent and communicate out the stakeholders' thoughts and processes at the table. So when we went through the strategic planning, those were the main components that we worked with. The challenge is it's great. We have that information. All that's all laid out nicely on a piece of paper. Now the question is, how do we continue to breathe life into this, and that it's what the school district is about. This is the strategic plan that the school district is about. This is the stakeholders that were brought to the table, that were the voice that came to this, and how do we continue to work through that strategic plan and making sure we have the point people to be able to run certain components of that strategic plan. Otherwise, it's just going to be shuffled underneath other papers, and then people don't talk about it. I really think it's important that school districts have a strategic plan so we can continue to grow and foster the student academic learning, and their social emotional awareness too.
Thank you.
Jeff, provide an example of when you have successfully repaired damaged relationships.
Yeah, so here's one that I did. We had a teacher. This would have been my second year being a principal at Brooklyn Center. We had a white female teacher who, in the classroom, what I saw was really, really fantastic. She cared about kids, good relationships with kids. We were towards the end of the year, and it was at a recess one time, and I had 2 or 3 students that came up to me and said, Mr. Wilson, that teacher's racist, meaning the teacher that I was just speaking to. And I looked at that and I personally kind of brushed that off because I've seen the work that this teacher does. I don't believe this teacher is racist. I don't believe that this teacher has a bad bone in the body to be racist or to come across racist. But what I did is I totally disregarded what the student voice was. Now, in the same context of that, the social worker, who is also a student of color, also a person of color, kind of pulled me aside and said, hey, Jeff, this is how things perpetuate. Here you are as a white male, and you just totally disregarded what students of color had said about a white female teacher. And so that was a really big learning experience for me. And so I not only caused harm to the students, I caused harm to that teacher, our social worker of color. Because again, now we're good, everything's fine. I just, put it underneath the rug, right? And she called me out on it. And that was a growing moment for me, and definitely one of the best professional moments that I probably ever could have as a human, because I learned a lot through that process of how, as even though you may not believe, or even though you may not take that part serious, yep, you take it serious and you follow up with that. and you get a better understanding and engage to understand why the students feel that way. And again, maybe because this happened out at recess time, kids were playing. Maybe it wasn't just in the atmosphere of coming into the office and letting me know. Maybe that's why, but it doesn't matter. When a student has said that to me, I need to take everything serious on that and work through that. Because the other learning part of that was following up with the teacher and having that conversation with her about, hey, here's what was brought to my attention. Here's where I failed as a leader in the building. And I wanted her to know and understand where I was coming from. And I wanted her to reflect on her practices and maybe what she might have said or done for students to feel that way. So going through that process and connecting back with the social worker to let her know, hey, I messed up. I got to own that. I think that did build back relationship with the social worker. And I know she appreciated that, but I did harm to her.
All right. Question number 13. A superintendent's leadership style impacts the tone of the organization. What do you consider to be important leadership qualities that you would bring to La Crescent Hoka Public Schools?
Well, if I haven't portrayed this now, I'm very open and honest. I feel I have integrity. I'm ethical. I'm kind of an open book in the sense of just being transparent. If I don't know, I'm going to tell you I don't know, but that also means I'm going to follow back up with you. I think those skill sets, just having that, the wanting and the willingness to have conversations, hard conversations, and to build trust with people, even though they may not trust a superintendent, and that's okay too. But that doesn't mean I'm gonna quit. I stay at it. I don't know any other way. I think my work ethic is one that I just don't quit. I just don't quit. And I know that my name doesn't have the superintendency tag next to it, but the work that a superintendent does is collaborative. They support, they provide resources, and I've done all those things in the buildings that I've served, in the districts that I've served. And in my mind, there's nobody that's going to work harder than me. Now that's just my mentality, and I don't mean to be arrogant about that. That's just my mentality. Like, I'm going to do whatever it takes.
All right, thank you.
All right, describe your understanding and/or preference of the role of an administrator as opposed to the role of a school board member and the school board.
So the school board, I mean, they're the governing body. So the school board's responsibility are policy, setting the annual tax levy, setting the annual budget, and hiring and firing superintendents. That's the job of school board. Superintendent would be decisions on making educational spending, school staff, facilities, whether it be upgrading facilities. So I look at it in those two rounds. I would look at the superintendent as a conduit to the staff. I know that, for me, I just look at a school board and a superintendent to be very relational, to support on both ends. A lot of conversations, a lot of communication needs to happen, so that way all parties know, what's happening in the building and outside of the building too. And especially, if there's a big item that might be brewing, I'm going to be that first person to give calls to the school board, let you know and have a heads up. Because vice versa, I know if you're hearing something, I would want a heads up too. So that's kind of how I see the role of a superintendent and a school board, defining those pieces. With so much, that's easy to say just like that, but there's just it's very complex. But I think just the more communication we have when we talk about, for example, setting the budgets and things of that nature, we usually land, we get to where we want to, we get to where we want to get to.
Jeff, you have 30 minutes left.
Okay, thank you.
And we're on last question. What questions do you have for us?
Hey, that was a trick thing there. Okay, I've got 30 minutes of questions now to ask you.
Morgan's on a
You
roll.
gotta tell them that.
Okay. Yeah, I only have a few, actually, two this round. So this is certainly a major concern in education right now across the board, not just the state, just everywhere. And it's about retention of teachers, getting teachers. I'm just curious, what is the retention rate of the district right now? And you may not know exactly, but I'm curious if you know what the retention rate is, and is there an onboarding plan to help reduce the perpetual turnover if there are a lot of staff that are leaving?
I don't know.
Last year we did, well, if you talk from the end of the school year through currently, we have 22% of our staff that have left the district. 75% of them were replaced, but, so yeah, you're looking at about 22% of our regular staff, not including coaching or our kids program.
Can you hear all of that?
Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Last year.
school year?
Last school year.
That have left since the last school year through up until this point.
And that's certified staff, paraprofessionals, janitors, you name it.
It's just, yes, it's our
Everything.
regular staff.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it is up, from passage, but we're kind of seeing that everywhere, so.
Yep.
I would say a few things the board has done over the past year is we have looked at pay rates for some staff. Subs, for example, we had a hard time getting subs in to give staff, needed days off. So we did some comparisons with, and I'll say that the administrators did that, right? They did that. They brought the recommendation to the board approved it. And as far as the rest of it, I would say that would be your job, right? How are you going to keep our teachers here and keep them happy, and bring recommendations to us, on how we need, what do we need to do to make that happen?
Yeah. No, so that's definitely a concern that I've had just with education over the past 5 years. And so seeing this now, usually for me, it started with bus drivers, but now we can see it across the board where even in the cities, if I had a fourth grade position open, I'd have maybe 2 applicants, and that's even in the cities. So it's tough. It's just tough all around. And so, building out a game plan to, as you said, maybe a higher pay rate if that works out. But just the onboarding is so important and critical for new staff that can come in, and how do we engage them in such a way that they want to stay, that they feel comfortable, that we give them the tools that they need to be successful, and that they want to stay, because we need good people to stay and work with our kids. So, okay. And the next question I have is, it kind of goes back and forth a little bit, but what are you looking for in your next superintendent?
Well, I guess from my own standpoint, it's someone who's authentic, who's energetic, who's always there for the people. Your staff having your cell phone number that they can reach you. How good are you if we can't find you? We need you available, that you're there to lead, you're there to see. You had said earlier too that you're not in your office. I really want people out. We have so many different activities going on. You being out in the community, seeing people, seeing what's going on, talking to people directly. That's what I want to see in the superintendent. Someone's part of the community that's there, being part of everything we have going on, and then making good decisions based on that and listening to people. And being a bartender at Applefest.
Yeah, I saw the Apple Capital sign on my way out on that last week. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's where that all stemmed from. I get it. I get it now. I get the Apple jokes. Yeah, that's it. That's the two questions I had.
Anyone else care to share what they're looking for in a superintendent? We've got the time.
I'll share. I think, the superintendent role is really, you're the CEO of the district, and your number one customer is the students. You're going to hear input from their parents, from the staff serving the students. But, to me, that really is the role, is you're the CEO, and we need to satisfy our customers, and those are the students.
Well, all right, I'll go. What everyone has said, want a good communicator, someone that can, can assess a situation and, provide supports. And if they don't have the supports themselves, know where to look. To that end, on question 8, when they asked you about, your take on staff assessments, you didn't really touch on teachers. How can you, we have time, what's your take on, or how do you do staff evaluations, teacher evaluations?
So teacher evaluation. So in our current district, we go through the process and we observe 4 times a year on paper. We have we go through the pivot model, which is kind of it's very in depth, and there's a rubric that's attached to that clarifies different areas of competencies for teachers. And the teachers at the beginning of the year, they set their goals up. Like, these are the areas of focus that they want to do. In addition to their goals, I might have 1 or 2 for them to work on as well. And maybe one of the leading goals would be bringing equity into the classroom. So what are some of the components that you're going to do in your classroom for that? As we go through the process, I look at, and again, a lot of it's touch points, but when it's a formal observation, it's a drop in. I don't let them know that I'm coming in because I don't want a dog and pony show. I just come in and then I watch and I sit back and I observe. I take notes. I provide feedback with them afterwards in a follow-up conversation and let them know the strengths and the weaknesses, more so the strengths that I'm seeing, but areas of growth that we can move towards. And then I always want to plug in my goals too that I had for them so that they're not forgetting about that. Like, for example, the equity component we talked about. But I also reevaluate their goals too. If they're already really strong in the areas that they selected, which a lot of times they do because they know they're good in that area, no, let's move on from that. Let's go to an area that you can really grow in. And so, it's just those kinds of conversations. And how do we shift from just doing the very procedural of these observations to really having good, authentic conversations about teaching and learning, the practice of teaching and learning. I think it's really powerful. So we go through this process 4 times. And also, in addition to that, they also provide artifacts. So if it's an artifact that relates to one of their goals, they'll send that to us in this uploaded link of Pivot. They'll send us some of the work that they're working with students. A lot of times when I go into a classroom, it's not what I listen to teachers. I actually listen more with kids. I kind of listen to see what they're learning. I have conversations with them about, what are you learning about? And I let teachers know that right away. When I walk in, again, I'm not looking for a dog and pony. I don't need to see a stage on the stage. I want to see what kind of pieces that you are bringing to the table. What kind of academic rigor are you bringing into classrooms for students to understand? And if they don't understand, then that's the second part of the question. So you see that students A, B, and C are not understanding this. Talk to me a little bit about that. What has been your criteria? How are you scaffolding this so that way students are being successful? So as we go through that process, again, we're looking for growth all the way through the year. And if we're seeing where things aren't up to par, it's those honest conversations by mid-year, because we're letting them know, hey, just giving you a heads up. Here's some things I think you do really well, but we need to see improvement on this. And if it comes to be where improvement isn't made as we go through that process, then that's when we move to non-renew a teacher if that's what it takes, if that's what it needs to have happen, which, especially when there's a shortage of teachers, that's one of your last resorts. But at the same time, it's about kids. And we know that we're making $1 million investment with teachers in tenure. So it's really important to me personally that we have the highest quality of teachers working with students. Back in the day, I'm old. I've been in this for like 25 years almost. I remember back in the day, we used to have our poorest performing teachers work with title because administrators didn't know what to do with teachers. So we're just going to make you the title teacher, where in fact, right, the title teachers are one of the most important people because they teach reading, specific content reading skills. And so that part has certainly changed over the course of years, but we just need highly successful, highly capable teachers who are in it for kids to be able to do the work. And if they're struggling, it's our job to provide the tools and resources for them so they can be successful. And after that, if it's not working out, then that's when we have that counseling conversation, counsel them out of the system. But it's super important. We don't have any time to spare. Like we've got to get after it, especially after a 2-year pandemic. We've got to stay on our A game the entire time, and we all know how challenging that is. We know that teachers they're tired, they're worn out. And how do we keep that morale up for teachers and keep them going? And how can we be a cheerleader in their corner to help and support them every step of the way? And again, it comes back down for me personally for those relationships.
I think what I'm looking for is somebody that's going to come in here and make things better. The people that you work for, make them better. Help the teachers become better. Help the students become better. I want this community to be better because we've hired you as a superintendent.
Yeah, it's real.
All right. Anything else? Any other questions from you, Jeff?
No, I appreciate the time. You're a fun group when I always saw you in person. And even though I'm not there, I'm sitting here, I have my water, and we had a little bit of laugh about apples and other things. But I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
All right, very good. Thanks very much. We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
All right, thanks again. Take care, everybody.
Yep.